Hey everyone, welcome in. Hope you're having a great week. It is a Thursday Colts preview edition of the Utopia Football Podcast. I am Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610. Got my red Texans hoodie on. I got my Yeti Texans mug ready to go. I'm all Texaned out. I got the logo going on over here on the TV screen if you're watching on YouTube. I'm ready to go for week one, man. I'm fired up. I hope you're fired up as well. You can hear Payne and Pendergast 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Sports Radio 610. You can hear the game this weekend against the Colts. Did I mention I'm fired up for it? Yes. Noon on Sunday, Sports Radio 610. 9 a.m. Texans pregame. Texans countdown starts with me and Seth Payne getting you ready for the game and all the NFL action that day. So as I'm recording this, we're getting ready. We got the opener tonight. We've got with the Ravens and the Chiefs. We've got the Brazil game tomorrow that apparently a bunch of players are freaked out by having to go to a high crime country like Brazil. So that's fun. Packers and Eagles tomorrow. And then we've got a full slate of games on Sunday. And then we got Monday Night Football. It's here, man. It is here. We had college football last weekend. Now we've got all Saturday and all Sunday football, baby. So today on the program, just to refresh, on the preview episodes, I get you caught up to speed with everything going on with the Texans, and then we do what we call the pregame six-pack, where I've got 6 nuggets to give you for the game on Sunday with the Texans and the Colts. Things to watch for, position battles or matchups. In the case of the Texans, a few new faces that we'll talk about, I'm sure, as we roll on here for the next several minutes on the podcast. But a reminder, if you could, subscribe, rate, review, like it says at the bottom of the screen right there. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so you get the podcast automatically. That's we appreciate that. Tell a friend or 100 that about the podcast, because the season is here. Appreciate you guys coming along for the ride, man. It's going to be a good one this season for the Texans. So let's get into it. A reminder as well, houmailbag@gmail.com. That's the email address. I do a mailbag episode every Tuesday. You guys are doing great at sending the emails in. Congratulations. If you want to send an email, houmailbag@gmail.com. I get to as many of them as I possibly can. I try to reply also to the ones I can't get to on the show. Try to. I don't promise anything. Got a lot of stuff going on, but houmailbag@gmail.com. Love the regulars that email in, but I love that we're getting new emailers every week as well. So that's very, very cool. All right, let's get into the news with the team. And I would say probably the biggest news, other than anything having to do with the Colts game, is Davis Mills got an extension. Kind of came out of nowhere. I forget who the listener to this podcast was that emailed about this very possibility. If it was you, if you're listening, you're like, Sean, it was me, then let me know so I can give you your props on the mailbag episode next week. But I actually had an emailer email the program. I think we even talked about it in the mailbag episode a couple weeks ago. What if the Texans offered Davis Mills a 1-year extension? The emailer said for $8 million. It ended up being for $5 million. I liked it at $8 million, the idea for the Texans of signing Davis Mills for another year. So clearly the Texans were on the same wavelength as myself and the emailer, in so much as they wanted to secure Davis Mills' services for another year. They like Davis Mills. They happen to be able to do it for a significantly lower sum than I and the emailer proposed at $8 million. They did it for $5 million. So for those who aren't up to speed on it, Davis Mills signed an extension that will take him through 2025. So he'll play out his rookie contract this year, and then they tacked another year on at $5 million for him to obviously be the backup quarterback to CJ Stroud. I think there's a couple interesting things here. The way we framed it when we did this question on the mailbag episode was, who says no? Who would say no to 1 year, $8 million? So let's do it. Let's play the same game with 1 year, $5 million, since that's what the deal ended up being. I think there's some playing time incentives in there. Quite honestly, they're playing time incentives that I hope Davis Mills never hits, because that would mean that CJ Stroud is out for some reason, unless he's able to hit those escalators for playing time by just being in mop-up duty in the fourth quarter of a bunch of blowouts where CJ hung 50 on a bunch of teams. That's the only way I want Davis Mills to get his playing time incentives. So I think at 1 year, $5 million for Davis Mills, if you had asked me who says no to that, look, my answer was Davis Mills when we proposed 1 year, $8 million. So certainly I think Davis Mills, like if someone told me this is what's on the table, I would tell Davis Mills to say no, only because, and again, I'm applying my criteria as if I am Davis Mills. I think Davis Mills, if he had just played out his contract, I think he would have gotten a decent backup or bridge quarterback money on the open market. Sam Darnold's making $10 million this year. Davis Mills is better than Sam Darnold. I know he wasn't the third overall pick like Sam Darnold, but Sam Darnold fucking sucks. He's awful. So I think Davis Mills, I'm not saying he would have gotten $10 million, but I think he would have got more than 5, and I think he would have got more than 1 year. So if money were the biggest thing, I think Davis Mills says no. And Davis Mills is not a dummy, nor is his agent, I would assume. I don't know who his agent is. So I think they know that as well. Davis Mills, it would appear, wanted to stick around for another year for, I would speculate, a few reasons. Now, Davis was asked about this in the locker room yesterday, and he didn't really give a specific answer as to why he signed the extension. But if I had to guess, I would think another year in Bobby Slowick's system can only be a good thing. Keep in mind, as Davis pointed out, this is the first year since back in college that he hasn't changed OCs in the offseason. He's in the same system for 2 years in a row. So why not do 3 years in a row? Number two, he may just really like playing for the Houston Texans. I think Davis Mills signing this contract can be construed as a commentary about the culture of the team and how fun that place is to come to work right now with DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson there, specifically for the quarterbacks, obviously, Bobby and Gerard. So I would say if this proposal were on the table, like who says no, I would think Davis would say no, but he said yes. So why he said yes, I think those would be the reasons why. He likes playing for the Texans. He likes playing in this system. Another year in this system can only be a good thing. And I would say this, he probably has a chance to become even more valuable if he's able to get in and play with this group of weapons. You know what I mean? If Davis is able to get in and get a couple games under his belt with Joe Mixon at running back and Stephon Diggs at wide receiver to go along with Nico and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz and everybody else. I mean, it's the complete opposite of what they were throwing him to the Wolves with back in his rookie year, where he's got Brandon Cooks and basically nobody else. He's got a bunch of crappy running backs. He's got Pharaoh Brown playing tight end. He's got Chris Conley on the opposite side of Brandon Cooks. This is the complete opposite of that. Like, he's got high-level weapons all over the place. Nick Caserio's done an amazing job of quickly flipping this roster on both sides of the ball, but particularly on the offensive side of the ball. So if Davis Mills, and again, I hope this doesn't happen because it means that CJ's out for some reason. If Davis Mills gets in and plays a few games with all these weapons, he's going to look really, really good. I have a feeling. So those would be the reasons why that Davis signed that. I think the other interesting angles with this contract extension with Davis Mills is that, keep in mind, it was week 15 of last season where Davis Mills was the backup quarterback all year long, including, at least on paper on the depth chart, the week leading up to the Titans game in Nashville in week 15. And they flipped and made Case Keenum the starting quarterback that week and the following week. So clearly Davis Mills was impressive to DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio throughout training camp, because his only opportunity to play was a few snaps as kind of a shuttle in and out guy in the Cleveland game. Like, Case started that game, but Davis got a few series in that game. So, and DeMeco said that multiple times yesterday in his press conference when he was asked about this Mills extension. He mentioned training camp 5 or 6 times within about 30 seconds. So I like the message it sends to the rest of the team that the practices at training camp are clearly an important data point in evaluating. I'm not going to say they're more important than games. It's not like they handed Davis Mills a 3-year, $50 million contract. It's a fairly low-level contract, but it's good. It's good money. It's better money than most of the world makes. But they didn't have to give him anything, and they gave him 1 year, $5 million. And I think, and DeMeco said the reason that one of the big reasons they had come to the table was he looked really good in training camp. He clearly has improved, and he's way ahead of Case Keenum now on the depth chart. Nick Caserio said that before, I think, the Giants game in the preseason. He told John Harris that Davis is the clear number 2 and he's not going anywhere. So not only was he not going anywhere and not getting traded, they extended him, which again adds another interesting wrinkle. If Bobby Slowick were to leave to go somewhere after the season to be a head coach, would he want to bring Davis with him as sort of the, kind of the Case Keenum of his quarterback room, or maybe even a bridge starter. I don't know that Davis is going to get treated like an actual like frontline starter ever. But if Bobby Slowick were to go somewhere, would he want to bring Davis Mills with him? And if so, if he wanted to, the team Bobby went to would have to trade for him. So this does make what I think could potentially be a valuable trade asset, property of the Texans for another year after this season. So that's a smart move by Nick Caserio as well. I think the last thing on this, and then we'll move on to the Colts game, the 67th pick, as long as we're talking about Nick Caserio, Davis Mills was Nick Caserio's first draft pick as GM of the Texans with the 67th overall pick towards the beginning of the third round back in 2021. I think the pick was already justified just because you got your backup quarterback and a part-time starter for a few years with a third-round pick. I know people, some of you listening are probably like, what are you talking about? Like, Davis Mills has a bad record as a starter, and he got displaced by Case Keenum last year, and now they're paying him. Look, go look at the draft. Like, you start to get into the back end of the second and the beginning of the third round, and it starts to get very janky. So that they got a quarterback who's served as a backup, has won a few games for them, now is going to be their backup, and they feel like has really improved to where he's a capable backup with the 67th overall pick. That's a win. If you look at Pro Football Reference, they have a stat called approximate value for players. It's a counting stat. It's a cumulative stat. It's not a per game stat. Just a cumulative stat that is kind of mysterious in how it's calculated, but they calculate just how much value this player has brought to the table as an NFL player. And it's quantitative. It's a counting number. Davis's is 15 for what it's worth. His approximate value for the 4 years that he's been in, or 3 years now going into his fourth, that he's been in the league is 15. For some context, because you're probably wondering, so is that good? That doesn't mean shit to me, Sean. Thanks a lot. For context, that his grade of 15 with approximate value is better than 20 of the 32 players that were taken in the second round, the round ahead of Davis Mills. So Davis was a third rounder. His approximate value over the course of his career is better than well over half of the second rounders taken in that draft. So I say all that to say, like, it's not a perfect stat, but I think it does illustrate that it's been an okay pick. Like, that was not a blown pick by the Texans. If nothing else, Davis Mills was the starting quarterback for two shitty teams that wound up getting you CJ Stroud because you were so bad. All right. So if we want to look at it that way, we can look at it that way. But so that's all on the Davis Mills extension. Congrats to Davis. He seems very happy to be sticking around here. All right, let's get to the Colts and the Texans. I'm going to do a Colts-Texans six-pack as the graphic there. There we go. Colts-Texans six-pack for this game coming up on Sunday. I think it's interesting just to lay out the what, the where, the who, the spread, and everything else. Noon kickoff, Central Time, because I know there's some of you that listen in the Eastern time zone, the Western time, Pacific time zone, Mountain, Liverpool, Shanghai, all over the place. Noon Central, 9 a.m. Texans countdown on the Odyssey app. You can listen to me and Seth get you ready for the game. And then Clint Stoerner and I will have post-game duties following the game. The game is at Lucas Oil Field. The spread is up to -3 for the Houston Texans. So this game at one point in the offseason was Colts +1. The fact that it's not just swung 4 points, but swung 4 points through what we call through the zero, where it went from Colts, I should say it was Colts -1. So the Colts were a 1-point favorite, and now the Texans are a 3-point favorite. So for that to flip that drastically, 4 points is a big swing along any line of the spectrum. But for a game to go from like a team favored by 4 to being favored by 8, that's meaningful. But for the public to actually say, not only does the spread move 4 points, but we don't think the home team is going to win this anymore. We think the road team is going to win this, is significant. And the money that's come in on this game on the Texans is significant. It is one of the most bet games of the weekend. There was a quote from a general manager of a sports book. I forget which one, that said that this is the heaviest his book has been on one team in 4 years. People are on the Texans. So I think that's partially because of how much love the Texans have been getting this offseason. I think CJ Stroud is a marquee player in the NFL. Quarterbacks drive behavior of bettors, especially square bettors, novice bettors, amateur bettors. I have to believe that as soon as that thing went from Texans -2.5 to Texans -3, that a lot of sharp bettors jumped on the Colts +3. So that makes me nervous. Just if many of you know, I like to gamble, certainly like to follow the gambling, the dark arts, as I like to call it. And anytime the public is that heavy on one side, you run the other way. Like, they don't build the buildings out there in Vegas because they're giving away money to a bunch of squares that are betting -3 on the Texans. So I'm not betting it. I'll give you my prediction later. Not betting it doesn't mean that I'm picking the Colts in this game. Maybe I am, though. You never know. I'll get to my prediction. That's the last can of the six-pack is my prediction on the game. So we'll get into the six-pack here. I do think two other things that they've played the Colts in Indy the last 2 seasons in the final game of the year. Now they're opening there. So, and they've been significant games. Last year, it was for a playoff spot. The year before that, that was the game that decided if the Texans were picking first or second in the draft. I remember how angry we all were that they went and won that game, and they picked second instead of first. Now they're not going to get Bryce Young. They're going to get CJ Stroud. How did that work out? And I was one of them. I wanted Bryce Young. So this isn't me throwing shade at those of you who wanted Bryce. I wanted Bryce too. I'm glad I was wrong on that one. So instead of finishing up the season with something on the line, instead we start the season in Indianapolis, which is fantastic. This is the most important game on the schedule. And I know they play the Chiefs, and I know they play the Ravens. And until I know that the Texans are going to be in the mix for, say, a number 1 seed, right? Until I know that, this is the most important game because you start with winning the division. And it's not the most marquee game. I think that I can name 6 games that have more marquee value than this game. I just named 2 of them. But I think the Cowboys game, the Lions game, the Jets game, these are all primetime games or national games. I think the Bills game in week 5 is probably a little sexier than this game to a lot of people. This is the most important game of the season, though, because winning the division is the first goal. And this is, in my opinion, the second best team in the division behind the Texans, and you would be winning at their place, which you've been able to do the last 2 years. 2 years ago, it didn't feel great, turned out to be the right thing. Last year, it felt phenomenal, making the playoffs. So this empirically, to me, is the most important. And not because it's the opener and it sets the tone. I'm saying, like, literally mathematically, like, you win this game in Indy, and you've got a big jump on defending your AFC South crown. So with that, let's get to the six-pack here of things to watch for. Number 1 in the six-pack is Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, who tore up the Texans last year in, I don't know, like a half of play, something like that. Gardner Minshew came in the second quarter of that game and did a nice job and was able to steer the ship to shore. They were awful when Anthony Richardson was in there. They were particularly poor against the run, including Will Anderson, who just totally lost contain on one of the touchdowns Anthony Richardson had. I think, to me, the real key with respect to Anthony Richardson, one is you got to tackle. That goes for Anthony Richardson. That goes for the defense in general with the Texans. They were a poor tackling team last year, as D'Amico Ryans pointed out this week. They have to tackle, particularly in this game with this quarterback. He is a big, freaky beast, and they've got to tackle. But I think they've got to get him in passing situations. First and second down are real keys in this game to get Anthony Richardson into unfavorable passing situations. He's got a super talented arm, but that thing is wild. You don't know where the ball's going. He can make throws that only a few people on the planet can make. He also has throws that it looks like I'm making. So in terms of accuracy, I'm guessing he's got a little more velocity on his throws than I do, maybe a higher spin rate too. But I think when he does run and use his legs, and he will, got to tackle. But I think the big thing is winning on first and second down, the run defense, winning on first and second down, getting him in passing situations, crowd the box, make him beat you with his arm, because I don't think he can. Anthony Richardson has only started 23 games as a quarterback, high school, college, pro combined. So he's far from a finished product. You've got to take the parts of his game that being unfinished hurts him, and that's the precision and the accuracy and the passing and the need to go through progressions and read defenses, all the things that theoretically he is still working on. He ain't working on running. He can run, and he can run over you, and he can run past you. But get him into those passing situations. So that's six-pack number one. Got to contain Anthony Richardson, and I think that's how you do it, is try to make him beat you with his arm as best you can. Number two, as far as the six-pack goes, I'm going to stay with the Colts here. And Jonathan Taylor. If Anthony Richardson doesn't beat you, then Jonathan Taylor is next on the list to beat you. And Jonathan Taylor is, when healthy, and he is healthy, one of the best running backs in football. He ran for 188 yards against you last year in that Week 18 game. Now, in that Week 18 game, he got banged up in that game, and I think swarming and, abusing Jonathan Taylor would be a good thing to do in this game. This needs to be one of those games like DeMeco Ryans used to have with San Francisco when he was the DC there, where teams the next week, they felt it. The Niners in 2022, I don't know if a lot of people remember this, the opponents that played the 49ers, the following week after playing the Niners, they were winless throughout when they had to play the next week. I think there was one, it might have been the Chiefs had a bye afterwards, and then they went and won. But teams that had to play the Niners, DeMeco Ryans defense, the week after, they didn't win games throughout 2022. I don't know what the record was for the Texans last year. I do know that the defense last year, while more physical than previous Texans defenses, did not look like a 49ers defense. I think Azeez Al-Shire will play a big role in that. But I think you got to pound Jonathan Taylor. You got to punish him and make him pay for carrying the football. The 188 yards they gave up last year, he was really good in that game. I do think part of that was they were going to make Gardner Minshew beat them. So, it's almost like a basketball player. You're like, all right, I know Steph's going to get his 40. I just got to make sure so-and-so and so-and-so doesn't get theirs. So while he ran roughshod all over them in that game last year, I do think that might have been just a byproduct of the game plan that the Texans had. Now, that said, you should never give up 188 yards. You should never be giving up 6 yards a carry on 30 carries. But yeah, like the tackling issue is just as big a thing with Taylor as it was with Richardson. And they got to shore it up. Like even in that first game of the year against the Colts, Jonathan Taylor didn't play. Zach Moss did, but Zach Moss ran for 88 yards on 18 carries in that game. So he ran for almost 5 yards a carry. So this is a lot of pressure on the new interior defensive lineman that they've brought in, Foley Fatukasi, Mario Edwards. I don't know if Tim Settle plays in this game or not. He was banged up in training camp, but he's not on the – there's virtually nobody on the injury list other than MJ Stewart, the safety. So that a lot of pressure on those guys. I think a lot of pressure on the linebackers to stay disciplined, not only with Richardson, but with Taylor as well. No Christian Harris is going to hurt in this game. Big pressure on Henry To'oTo'o, and I would say on Jalen Petrie too, if Petrie's playing up in the box. So six-pack can number one, Anthony Richardson. Six-pack can number two, Jonathan Taylor. Got to tackle those guys. All right, number three. I need a real can. I just got to go. You know what? I'm going to go get some Yingling flights. That's what I'm going to do next time. I am really pumped, and I think it's a key matchup, but I'm really pumped to watch Laramie Tunsil go against the rookie Leatu Latu from UCLA, guy who was retired from football briefly in college when he had a neck injury, found a doctor that would clear him, and then he went to UCLA as a transfer from Washington and turned himself into a first-round pick. He was the first defensive player taken in the draft, this past draft. 14 guys taken ahead of him, all on the offensive side of the ball. Word out of Indianapolis is he's looked good throughout training camp. This is going to be a fascinating matchup because this is Laramie Tunsil's forte, pass protection. And as my co-host Seth Payne has pointed out many times, the one thing that Laramie does really well as some of the elite pass rushers do, is use his hands. So it's a lot of hand fighting. Laramie's excellent in pass pro. The hope is that the rookie gets a real lesson. And I know they got Kwity Paye over on the other side. He'll be going against Titus Howard. I'm assuming that's how they line up. Maybe they move him around. I haven't watched enough Colts film to know exactly what they do. The interior of that defensive line is really, really good as well. Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner. So that might be an even bigger key is the Colts interior D-line versus the Texans interior O-line, the weak link of the Texans offensive line, at least on paper right now. But this can in the six-pack is more just me about being excited to see Laramie Tunsil go against the rookie Latu and see what happens with that. So that's can number 3. Can number 4, Joe Mixon. It doesn't even really feel like Joe Mixon's on the Houston Texans. It's weird. He didn't carry the ball in any of the preseason games. He carried the ball very few times out of practice. And other than the 3 practices in Ohio, I was at every single practice. And Joe Mixon, until the tail end of training camp, really wasn't doing much out there. He looks to be in great shape. When he was working out off to the side, he looked to be in great shape. Whatever quad issue he was working through, it seems to be gone now. And they need Joe Mixon. You know, this is a running back room. And I think watching how this running back room gets deployed, I'll do this as a sub can, or this will be a shot next to the can I'm drinking right now, the 6-pack. What happens when Joe Mixon's out of the game? Who's in there? Is it Cam Akers, who, based on training camp, probably deserves to be the number 2 back? Is it Dameon Pierce, who, based on training camp, probably barely deserves to be on the team, just based on what we've seen? Obviously, D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio see Dameon behind the scenes a lot more. They know a lot more of the why as to why Dameon has gone from being a juggernaut as a rookie to being very pedestrian now in year 2 and heading into year 3 of his career. The running back position in general, Joe Mixon is the part I'm most looking forward to. They've got to be able to run the football to get that play action established, because, man, if they get play action established with this group of skill guys, holy smokes. And that is the 5th can, a big one. I might shotgun this can. Hell unleashed offensively on the Indianapolis Colts. All you hicks sitting in the stand there in your overalls with your hay in your teeth and your Peyton Manning jerseys on underneath your overalls. That's how I picture all of you there at the games. I've never been to a stadium. I went to a game there, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, a Texans-Colts game. Never been to a stadium with more people wearing jerseys ever in my life than Indianapolis. I choose to believe those jerseys were worn underneath overalls, and you have a straw hat on and a piece of hay in your teeth. Because I'm telling you, all you yokels, C.J. Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, they're about to unleash hell on you. I cannot wait to watch what this offense looks like and see just how much open room there is out there with those 3 running routes. And if they're in 11 personnel with a running back and a tight end, 5-headed monster, man. CJ himself said it. It's going to be fun. And I think this will lead into the 6 can of the 6-pack, which is my prediction. This will be the reason why the Texans win and cover in this game. I'm not betting on it because I'm not going with the crowd. I'm not putting my hard-earned money on it, but I am on the same side of you guys as to what I think is going to happen. All you people there backing the Texans -3. I've got Texans 27, Colts 20. And I think the difference in this game is the weak link for Indianapolis is their secondary. And I don't think they have answers for everything the Texans are going to throw at them. I think if that interior of the Texans offensive line can just keep Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner in front of them, because I trust Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard to do their job on the edge guys. If they can give CJ time, if they can run the football and keep Indianapolis off balance, they have no answers for all the firepower that they're going to unleash on them. And I think that's going to be good enough to easily get you 27 points. And I think the defense holds up, and they frustrate Anthony Richardson into a few mistakes. I think his inability to be on Stroud's level as a passer, very few are, but I'm saying Anthony he's a below average passer. He's got a great arm, below average passer. That comes back to bite. 27-20. I feel good about it. The Texans beat the Indianapolis Colts and win what I just said, most important game on the schedule. All right. That was fun. We get to do a whole lot more of these. A reminder again, subscribe, rate, and review. A reminder again, noon Central Time, Sunday, Sports Radio 610 is kickoff. Be there at 9 a.m. for Texans Countdown. Seth and I will give you all the good stuff as we get ready for the Texans and the Colts in week 1. It's here. And then we got Sunday Night Football the week after that with the Bears coming to town. Appreciate all of you tuning in. Appreciate all of you listening. Next episode up will be right after the game is over, right after the post game is over on Sunday. As soon as the post game is over at 6:30, I flip this computer on and I record the recap version of the podcast. So hopefully we're recapping a win. Until then, I'm Sean Pendergast. Appreciate all of you listening. Have a fantastic day. You've been listening to the Utopia Football